Who's your commander?
Good luck.
Equip.
Move to combat. Resolves.
Thank you.
Now, before you attack
Does
me,
anyone have an answer?
well played.
Good game.
Hello, this is DJ from Jumbo Commander, and today's deck tech is on Grothama All-Devouring. Grothama All-Devouring is 3 green for a 10/8 legendary worm. All of those numbers just sound great to me. Let's keep going. Other creatures have, when this creature attacks, you may have it fight Grothama All-Devouring. When Grothama leaves the battlefield, each player draws cards equal to the amount of damage dealt to Grothama this turn by sources they controlled. That is a mouthful and one of the most unique commanders I have ever read. So this 5 CMC 10/8 worm gives everything else the ability to fight it. I mean, I want to battle a gigantic worm. That seems cool. And then when this worm dies, when you finally slay the monster, you get to draw cards equal to the amount of damage that you've done to it. This seems awesome and a huge liability at the same time. What happens if you play your cool general and then your opponents just say okay and swing at it, killing your general and drawing themselves a bunch of cards? So it sounds like we got some hoops to jump through, but this gigantic worm is totally worth it. Let's see what we can do. Well, the first thing that I think about when faced with a 10/8 is a power matters strategy. I just dealt with this when we talked about Ghalta Primal Hunger, the elder dinosaur out of Ixalan. I was surprised at how many green cards synergized so well with the creature's power, so I'm going to explore those a little bit. But power and toughness aside, it's Grothama's interesting text box that has a lot of people scratching their heads. I think it's pretty simple. We need to have cards that help us choose when we fight and when we don't fight. Sometimes we will want to fight our own commander drawing a ton of cards. Great, we want to be able to manipulate that situation. We want to sometimes be able to prevent our opponents from fighting our commander, and so we also want cards that support that. I think that Indestructible works both ways. It defends our commander, but it also allows our smaller creatures to fight Grothama and not die. So I'm going to explore Indestructible a little bit. And also, some of these cards in this deck are just destined to die. Grothama will be dying. We will fight it and draw tons of cards. And so we might as well get some value from our other creatures in this deck when they die. So I think the easiest thing to take advantage of in this deck is the power of Grothama. And when we support it with other creatures that have high power, not only do we build up this synergy of high power matters, but also it gives us other things to fight against our own worm general. So the Ghalta that I previously mentioned works great. We can cast it really cheaply, and then when it fights our worm, we'll draw 12 cards. And Ghalta doesn't even die. That's exactly what we want. Mossbridge Troll goes even more over the top. This 7 mana 5/5 has crazy abilities. First off, if it would be destroyed, regenerate it. Then tap any number of untapped creatures you control other than Mossbridge Troll, with total power 10 or greater. Oh my gosh, our commander's power is 10, and sometimes it will be greater. Mossbridge Troll gets plus 20 until end of turn. So you can tap your commander, your Mossbridge Troll becomes a 25/25, and then you just attack, and then suddenly you draw 25 cards. 25 cards. That's a quarter of your deck. That's so many cards. Oh my gosh. Okay, finally, we have Ronas the Indomitable. It's cheap. It's indestructible. I know I'm going to talk a little bit more about indestructibility later, but also it has the ability to pump other creatures up, giving them more power, which is kind of a strategy that we want to employ. So I just described a scenario where I drew 25 cards off of Mossbridge Troll. I think I want to draw more cards. Greater good. Let me sacrifice that gigantic powered creature and draw that many cards. Let's Garruk Primal Hunter minus to draw that many cards. Rishkar's expertise, draw cards equal to a creature's power. You know, all these do other stuff too, but come on, all of that card draw. And it meshes with our commander so well. Notice Greater Good is also a sacrifice outlet. This is going to be a really important thing that I'm going to touch on in other categories as well, but just let me introduce it to you. Grothama needs to die in order for you to draw all of those cards, so a sacrifice outlet like Greater Good could be really good, especially when you might have a few incidental creatures lying around that you want to cash in for cards, but not enough damage to actually kill your commander. Or you can also sacrifice it in response if your opponents are about to kill it and get all of that card advantage. Momentous Fall is similar to Greater Good, allowing us to draw cards equal to power, and it's instant speed, which means that we can react to our opponents, but it's a one-time use effect, just one instant. I don't know if that's enough. Same thing with Life's Legacy, it's really cheap, easy to cash in our commander to get a bunch of cards, but it's not instant, and so we can't use it reactively if our opponents fight our commander. And then finally, if we need to kill our commander, but also we want to get in a ton of damage, how about Berserk? Getting our commander huge, getting so close to dealing lethal commander damage, and then no matter what, we'll sacrifice it at the end of the turn, and then we'll draw all of those sweet, sweet cards from our epic attack. I just described some scenarios where I drew 50 cards. That's insane. And we can weaponize card draw with a card like Psychosis Crawler. 5 mana for a star. Its power and toughness are equal to the number of cards in our hand, which could be 1,000,000. It couldn't be 1,000,000, but it can be a lot. Okay. Whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life. So when we go off with card draw, we could just close out the game with Psychosis Crawler. And with all of these cards in our hand, let's keep them there with Praetor's Council, Reliquary Tower, Thought Vessel, even Venser's Journal. We could gain so much life that it just puts us out of reach of our opponents with a card like Venser's Journal and the card draw on this commander. Okay, I got a little bit distracted. I went down a rabbit hole of drawing my entire commander deck, but I'm back to talking about power and how power matters in this deck. Overwhelming Stampede and Pathbreaker Ibex can turn the power of our commander into an overwhelming army. And this is going to be a very creature-heavy deck because we want creatures to fight our commander. And so with all of those creatures, we can turn them into real threats. We can also do this turn after turn with a card like Dragon Throne of Tarkir. Equipped to our commander, it can give all of our creatures +10/+10. Oh, that's amazing. And of course, we'll have them all fighting our commander, drawing us even more cards. I think we got drawing cards and killing our opponent just really down well in this commander deck. I think the real bottleneck is going to be where it comes to mana. And we have a few ways to solve that deal with power. Sylvala, Heart of the Wilds, can add mana equal to a creature's power, and we're going to have a lot of it. Traverse the Outlands is a very special kind of ramp spell. You know, Soul Ring is so good, it ramps you from 1 mana all the way to 4 mana. Oh, so strong. Or things like Worn Power Stone, taking you from 3 mana to 6 mana in your next turn. Ooh, those are good plays. But then Traverse the Outlands will take you from 5 mana to like 15 mana. Whoa. This is where we get big bursts of mana. And Traverse the Outlands, although narrow, is very fun when we pull it off. Uvenwald Hydra is also something that deals with lands, has tremendous power, and can get us the specialty lands that we might need in this deck. I'm going to mention a few of them a little bit later. But one of them I've already mentioned, Reliquary Tower. Yeah, that's worth searching out of our deck. Indestructibility is going to be powerful in this deck. Stonehoof Chieftain is magical because it gives all of your attacking creatures indestructible. That means we can swing in with our entire team, have them all fight our commander, draw all of the cards, and none of our team dies. That's a really good scenario. Nylea, God of the Hunt, is indestructible herself and gives all of our other creatures trample. One thing about our commander, it's a kind of a vanilla 10-8. It doesn't have trample, it doesn't have reach, it's just this gigantic worm with this crazy fighting text on it. And so giving it trample with Nylea or with the Stonehoof Chieftain can be really strong, making our commander into a threat that cannot be chump blocked. And Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger, it's removal, it's got huge power, but also it's got indestructible. And so swinging in, it can fight and draw us 10 cards. 10 cards! 10 cards. 10. Man, Kozilek only draws you 4. Jeez. Now, I know I said that this is a deck that revolves around high-powered creatures, but let me convince you to include a 0-power creature. Stuffy Doll. 5 mana for a 0/1 construct. But Stuffy Doll does have indestructible, and when it enters the battlefield, you choose a player. Whenever Stuffy Doll is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to the chosen player, and Stuffy Doll can deal 1 damage to itself. But if you attack with Stuffy Doll and your commander on the battlefield, you will fight your commander, and Stuffy Doll will redirect all 10 of that damage straight at someone's face. Just imagine, every time you attack, it's just like, yeah, I'll 10 you. I'll 10 you. Oh my gosh, it's wonderful. It's got such a fun 1-2 punch. Mostly just a 10 to your face punch. Moving on though, we have other cards that synergize with fighting. Foe Razor Regent, it's a little bit awkward. This is such a great bulk card out of Khan's block. Let's take a closer look. 5 green for a 4/5 dragon with flying. When it enters the battlefield, you can fight target creature you don't control. That's a pretty good ability. You can kill something. Whenever a creature you control fights, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it at the beginning of the next end step. So that does mean that these creatures have to survive. But with Indestructible, your creatures will often survive. Just imagine if you have a Stonehoof Chieftain on the battlefield and you swing in with everything, just destroying your commander, drawing a bunch of cards, then Foe Razor Regent says, yeah, we'll just put 2 +1/+1 counters on your entire team. That's amazing. Or Vigor, which prevents the damage. I know that feels like a non-bow with your commander where you might want to fight it and kill it and draw a bunch of cards, but Vigor will give them all 10 +1/+1 counters. Vigor actually is insane in this deck. Damage that would be dealt to a creature you control other than Vigor, prevent that damage, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature for each 1 damage prevented this way. That's just any damage, and so when you go swinging fighting, all of your creatures will grow by the power of your commander, and your commander will grow huge as it takes damage from all of your creatures, but then gets prevented and grows that much bigger. It's just an insane interaction. I mean, I really want to do this. And then in the same vein of things, we have Polyraptor, where if it's dealt damage, you create another Polyraptor, so Polyraptor can just keep fighting your commander and making new copies of it. I thought about other Enrage cards, and not a lot of them work really well. Polyraptor is the only one that does work, and it only works kind of okay. It's 8 mana. Yeah. So some other ways to make things indestructible: Darksteel Plate, Hammer of Dazan. We can make our whole board indestructible with Soul of New Phyrexia, or Spearbreaker Behemoth can selectively make some big stuff we have indestructible. Now all of those are on-board tricks to give indestructibility. Those might be, I don't know, seen by your opponents, but something that's great is if your opponent swings all of their creatures trying to fight your commander to draw all of those sweet, sweet cards, and you just happen to cast Heroic Intervention. Suddenly, your Grothama is indestructible, and they just sacrificed their entire board for nothing. I love it so much. Gosh, I wish there were more effects like that. That feeling is so good. But ultimately, we have more flexibility than just indestructibility. Cauldron of Souls gives all of our creatures persist, so we can run them smack into our commander, draw a bunch of cards, but then have them persist back onto the battlefield. And then finally, we want to have control over when our commander fights, when it dies, and sometimes indestructibility doesn't allow us to do that. That's why sacrifice outlets like Mirror in the Moaning Well, High Market, Endless Sands, all of these can get the commander out when we need to and prevent him from drawing our opponents a bunch of cards. We don't want that. Our final category is Destined to Die, and this just seems fitting because Grothama herself is destined to die. We're gonna play the worm, and we know that we're gonna fight it to draw all of those cards. We know we're gonna crash into our opponents. We know we're gonna sacrifice her. And so I think it's only fitting to fill the deck out with other creatures that are destined to die. Also, it's kind of our plan to suicide creatures into each other to draw more cards, so we want disposable creatures. When I think about the ultimate disposable creature, it's gotta be Solemn Simulacrum. I'd get the land out of the ETB, and I kind of want the Solemn to die so I can draw that card. Yavimaya Elder, we want the Elder to die so we can get those lands. And so you can see that this suite of creatures that we have really is great because we can grow them with some of those abilities like that Pathbreaker Ibex or the Dragon Throne of Tarkir, or we can just throw them all at our commander and then draw a bunch of cards, changing in those stupid bodies for something that we can actually use. Farhaven Elf, Fierce Empath, Secure Tribe Elder, Woodland Bellower, all of these are utility creatures that do something, but then can also be used later on because any creature's body helps out in this deck. It can be sacrificed to our Worm commander or turned into a real threat when we pump the team. Because we're likely to sacrifice our creatures to our glorious Worm commander, we're going to want creatures that give us value on enter the battlefield or exit the battlefield, not necessarily mana dorks. There is one mana dork that I am excited about, and that's Shaman of Forgotten Ways. I like that it taps for 2, but really I like that Formidable. If I have the ability to make a ton of mana, I want to activate this and put my opponent to some stupid low life total. But for the most part, I want to make sure that my creatures do something and then turn into something disposable. I mentioned the power of sacrifice outlets. The best ones are instant speed because they can protect against what your opponent is doing, but sorcery speed ones are fine too, especially when they're powerful as Birthing Pod. Birthing Pod can change out a stupid creature that already gave you value into something better, or it can sacrifice your commander to get a 6-drop, and hopefully you fought it with a few stupid dorks and then you'll draw some cards too. That is some value right there. Protean Hulk belongs dead. So imagine this, you cast Protean Hulk and then you just fight your commander, and not only do you get to go get so many different creatures out of your deck, but you also draw all of those cards. And with all of the sacrifice outlets in this deck, you don't need to have Protean Hulk fight your commander. You can just sacrifice it to one of your utility lands, or Birthing Pod, or Evolutionary Leap, and still get all of that value. Now, I'm just getting good creatures. This is kind of a value Hulk. It's not a combo finish, and so I don't think that you should freak out about playing Hulk in here. I think this is kind of a fun way to introduce your play group and introduce yourself to playing Protean Hulk. Enjoy it. Get some cool cards out of your deck. Evolutionary Leap is a great instant speed sacrifice outlet and can help you churning through your deck, getting to more and more creatures. You know, I have a few more creatures that I really want dead. Druid's Call is an enchantment that enchants a creature, and whenever that creature takes damage, you get that many squirrels. Squirrels! Yes! So if you put this on your commander, you can even let your opponent fight it, who cares, but just all of the damage that you pour into this commander just generates us more and more squirrels to go off with. Saber Ants is just a piddly little 2/3 until you attack, fighting your commander, and then your 2/3 turns into 10 insect tokens. Yes! And all of those can fight your commander next turn. Now, hopefully, they'll get buffed up by some of those crazy abilities like Overwhelming Stampede. And then Bloodhatch Nantuko does the same thing, except for it's just a measly little 1/1 that you'll deal tons of damage to, creating an army of insects. You know, I really wish Hornet Nest did this as well, because it puts out flying Death Touch insects. but it's got Defender, so we can't swing in with it and have it fight our commander. I mean, we might be able to include some cards like Uvenwald Tracker that will sort of enhance the fight mechanic, and then we can have it fight our own commander or fight something else. That's kind of cool. Those last few cards create the most creatures, but some other cards produce a good amount. Hooded Hydra can give us double value, putting a ton of snakes onto the battlefield. Symbiotic Worm is a huge 7/7, but then creates an army in itself when it dies. Meiotic Slime gets more divided into smaller and smaller things. It's just kind of a cool value card. You can play it and then just keep fighting with these creature tokens, building up a massive army, and hopefully you can just overwhelm someone from there. The next two cards have to do with graveyard value, and they're destined to die. Green Warden Marasa gets us a card back when it enters, but also when it dies, so let's just kill it off. Moldgraph Monstrosity is definitely a monstrosity, an 8/8 insect with trample, but when it dies, you get to return 2 creature cards at random from your graveyard to the battlefield. I mean, odds are it's going to be cool creatures that fought your commander at one point in time, but that's just value right there. We totally want these things to die. And then finally, when we're talking about fighting, let's go with another fight golem, the Golden Guardian. A 4-mana 4/4 with Defender, but it's all about fighting. This is actually kind of mana ramp because you're going to kill this thing so easily with our commander and all the fighting going on that we're going to flip it over into Gold Forge Garrison. Add 2 mana of any one color to your mana pool. That's some good solid ramp, and it does something you want. It fights our own commander. And then also we can just keep pumping out golem tokens. And although a little bit expensive, 4/4 golems every single turn could be a force to be reckoned with. And finally, every commander deck that I've made from Dominaria, someone in the comments has suggested a card. I know the card is good. I know. It fits in so many commander decks, but this one time is amazing. Helm of the Host. Helm of the Host. You can equip it to your commander, and it will pump out copies that are not legendary, allowing you to have multiples of your commander. Now, this is great for so many commanders out there. It's a great card. It was super fun, guys. But come on, with Grothama, I'm going to put it on a 10/8, and then suddenly both of them have the ability to fight the other. Let me express how much crazy card draw that is in this deck. And ultimately, that's what this deck is all about. It's about craziness. It's about over the top. It's about sacrificing your awesome commander for even more value. I love this deck so much, almost as much as I love my patrons. Thank you, patrons, so much for supporting this channel and supporting everything that Jumbo Commander does. And as long as I'm thanking people, I have to thank TCGplayer.com. TCGplayer.com sponsors the Jumbo Commander channel. You can go right now and click on the deck list in the description. It'll take you over to TCG Player and it'll show you exactly how much this deck costs. And you can go through and find out which cards are just really not worth it and get rid of those, and then choose to keep the cards that make this deck awesome and affordable. I hope you liked this video. I really enjoyed making it, and I'd really like to chat with you about it in the comments below, on Twitter, wherever.